The intergalactic fashion gala was in full swing. The grand hall of the luxurious Celestera space station shimmered with golden lights, reflected from crystalline walls that stretched endlessly. The room was filled with the most powerful and influential beings from across the galaxy. Alien dignitaries, ambassadors, and celebrities mingled, their colorful outfits glittering under the ambient glow. Alex Carter, a human diplomat, felt completely out of place. Humans were still new to the galactic scene, and events like these reminded him just how insignificant Earth seemed compared to the vast universe. He adjusted the collar of his plain suit, which looked embarrassingly dull compared to the extravagant outfits around him. Just get through this evening, Alex muttered to himself. He was only here to represent Earth, but even that felt like a pointless task. No one seemed interested in talking to the lone human sipping water in the corner. Then, the music changed. A low, melodic hum filled the air, and all heads turned toward the grand staircase. Alex followed their gaze. Descending the steps was a figure who seemed to command the entire room's attention. Zaraleth. She was the galaxy's most famous supermodel, her name known even on Earth. Her species, the Levarians, were known for their ethereal beauty, but Zaraleth was in a league of her own. Her tall, slender form was wrapped in a shimmering silver gown that moved like liquid metal. Her violet skin seemed to glow faintly under the lights, and her deep golden eyes scanned the crowd with practiced elegance. Alex watched in awe as she moved gracefully down the staircase, her every step deliberate and powerful. Around him, whispers broke out. "She's even more radiant in person. I heard she just signed a deal with the Trilaxian jewelry empire. Can you believe a Levarian like her would even attend this event? It's beneath her." Alex shook his head, feeling ridiculous for even being here. He turned to leave, deciding that no one would notice if the human ambassador slipped out early. But just as he took a step toward the exit, he froze. Zaraleth was walking directly toward him. He blinked, unsure if he was imagining it. The crowd seemed to part for her as she glided through the room. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and Alex felt his heart skip a beat. Why was she looking at him? A human, of all people. Before he could think of a reason to escape, Zaraleth stopped in front of him. The faint scent of exotic flowers lingered around her. She smiled, and it wasn't the kind of polite smile she gave to the cameras. It felt genuine, almost curious. "Alex Carter, isn't it?" Her voice was smooth, with a melodic tone that made his name sound far more elegant than it was. Alex stammered, unsure how to respond. Yes, that's me. How do you?" "I've been looking for you," Zaraleth interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "We need to talk." Alex's confusion deepened. He glanced around, noticing the curious stares from the crowd. The room had gone almost silent, all eyes fixed on the unexpected scene of Zaraleth speaking to a human. "Talk. About what?" Alex asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zaraleth tilted her head, studying him for a moment. "Not here. Follow me." Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked toward a side door. Alex hesitated. This had to be some kind of mistake. Why would a galactic supermodel want to talk to him? But curiosity got the better of him, and he quickly followed. They entered a private lounge, far quieter than the bustling gala. The room was dimly lit, with soft couches and a large window that revealed the endless stars outside. Zaraleth gestured for Alex to sit, and for a moment, he felt like he was in some sort of dream. "Okay," Alex said, breaking the silence. "Why am I here?" Zaraleth sat across from him, her golden eyes piercing. "Do you remember Veltran IV?" The question hit Alex like a bolt of lightning. Veltran IV was a classified mission, one that had gone terribly wrong. It wasn't the kind of thing anyone should know about, especially not someone like Zaraleth. "I don't know what you're talking about," Alex lied, his voice faltering. Zaraleth leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Don't play dumb, Alex. You were there. You saved me. And now, She paused, as if choosing her words carefully. Now we have a problem. Alex's heart raced. A problem? What kind of problem? Zarelith sighed, her confident demeanor softening for the first time. You're not going to believe me, but you need to listen. I wouldn't come to you if it wasn't serious. Alex nodded slowly, his mind spinning. What could possibly connect a human diplomat to the galaxy's most famous supermodel? And what did Veltrin IV have to do with it? Zarelith leaned back, her golden eyes narrowing. What happened on Veltrin IV wasn't just a mistake. It changed everything, for both of us. Her words hung in the air like a storm cloud, and Alex felt the weight of something far bigger than himself settling over him. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Zarelith added, I'll explain everything, but you're not going to like it. Veltrin IV's secret. The words hung in the air like an unspoken threat. Veltrin IV. Alex froze in his seat, a shiver crawling up his spine. Veltrin IV wasn't a memory he liked to revisit. It was a volatile mission, buried under layers of classified reports and secrecy. Few knew the details, and even fewer survived to tell the tale. How do you know about Veltrin IV? Alex asked, his voice low and cautious. His instincts screamed that something was off, and Zarelith's unblinking golden gaze didn't help. Zarelith leaned forward, her posture poised but her expression oddly vulnerable. Because you were there when everything went wrong. And so was I. Alex's mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Veltrin IV was a hostile planet teetering on rebellion. His mission as part of an intergalactic peacekeeping team had spiraled into chaos when insurgents attacked. Amid the smoke and carnage, he vaguely remembered saving someone. A female Liverian, desperate and terrified. But how could that possibly connect to Zarelith, the galaxy's most untouchable supermodel? You're saying... Alex began, but Zarelith cut him off. Yes, she said sharply. I was the Liverian you saved that day. You pulled me out of the wreckage before the blast wave hit. I owe you my life. Her tone softened as she added, almost hesitantly, I never forgot your face. Alex shook his head in disbelief. That's impossible. The woman I saved disappeared as soon as the transport arrived. I didn't even know her name. Zarelith's lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, she seemed uncertain. I had to disappear, she said, her voice quiet. Do you know what would have happened if my identity was revealed? I wasn't just anyone on Veltrin IV. I was there under a false identity, hiding from enemies on my own planet. Alex's eyes widened. Enemies? You're saying the rebellion on Veltrin IV was connected to you? Not directly, Zarelith admitted, but my presence would have drawn attention. Let's just say I was trying to avoid being found. The pieces started to click together, but Alex still couldn't grasp the full picture. So you're telling me you've been in hiding, and now you're a supermodel. The words sounded ridiculous even as he said them. Zarelith chuckled, but there was no humor in her tone. It was the perfect cover. No one suspects the galaxy's most visible woman of hiding in plain sight. Alex frowned. If you've kept this secret for so long, why are you telling me now? Zarelith hesitated, her golden eyes shifting away for the first time. She seemed to be wrestling with something deeply personal. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because Veltrin IV didn't just change my life, it changed my body. My species, we're not like humans. When we experience extreme emotional or physical stress, our biology adapts, evolves. That day, something happened that shouldn't have been possible. She looked up, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that made his heart race. I'm pregnant, Alex, and the child. It's yours. The room felt like it had been sucked into a vacuum. Alex's mind went blank, and for a moment, he thought he'd misheard her. What? He said, his voice cracking. That's impossible. Humans and Liverians can't. Normally, no, Zarelith interrupted, her tone firm. But Veltrin IV was anything but normal. My body adapted to the bond we formed that day. You saved me, Alex. I don't think you realize what that meant to me, or what it did to me. Alex's heart pounded as he tried to process the bombshell she had just dropped. This has to be some kind of mistake, he said, shaking his head. I don't even remember. Of course you don't, Zarelith snapped, her frustration breaking through her calm exterior. You didn't know what was happening. But I did, and now I have proof. She pulled a small device from her bag and activated a holographic projection. A glowing image appeared between them, a detailed scan of what could only be described as a hybrid fetus. Its features were a strange blend of human and Laverian biology, with a faint golden glow surrounding its tiny form. Alex stared at the image, his stomach twisting. This can't be real. It is, Zarelith said firmly. And that's not all. My people, they won't allow this. Hybrids are forbidden in Laverian culture. If they find out, they'll do whatever it takes to destroy the child. That's why I came to you. Alex finally looked up from the hologram, his expression a mix of disbelief and anger. And what do you expect me to do? I'm just a diplomat. I can't fight an entire civilization. Zarelith leaned closer, her voice urgent. You don't have to fight them, Alex. You just have to help me run. Run. Alex repeated, his voice rising. You want me to go on the run with you across the galaxy. Do you realize what you're asking? Zarelith's expression softened, and for the first time, Alex saw a flicker of vulnerability behind her confident exterior. I know it's a lot to ask, she said quietly, but I don't have anyone else I can trust. You're the only one who can help me protect our child. Her words hit Alex like a punch to the gut. He didn't ask for this. He didn't want this. But as he looked into Zarelith's pleading eyes, he felt an undeniable pull, a sense of responsibility he couldn't explain. Before he could respond, the lounge door suddenly burst open, and two shadowy figures stepped inside. Zarelith's expression hardened, and she grabbed Alex's arm. They've found us, she whispered. We need to go. Now. Unraveling the truth. The stolen starship hummed with the quiet efficiency of Laverian technology as it darted through the shadowed expanse of space. Alex sat rigidly in the co-pilot's seat, his fingers gripping the armrests like a lifeline. Beside him, Zarelith piloted the craft with practiced ease, her violet fingers dancing across the controls. The silence between them was thick and uncomfortable. Alex's mind raced with questions, but none seemed to form into coherent words. He glanced at Zarelith, her golden eyes fixed on the viewport. Even in this moment of chaos, she looked poised, like someone who had rehearsed every move for this exact scenario. Finally, Alex couldn't hold back any longer. You're going to have to explain all of this, he said, his voice strained. What you told me back there, it doesn't make sense. None of it does. Zarelith didn't respond immediately. Her focus remained on the starry void ahead, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her calm exterior. After a long pause, she sighed and leaned back in her seat, her hands falling to her lap. I know it's a lot to take in, she said softly, but it's the truth, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner we can figure out what to do. Alex scoffed. Figure out what to do? You just told me I'm the father of a hybrid child, and now we're fugitives running from your entire species. That's a little more than something to figure out. Zarelith turned to him, her expression hardening. Do you think this is easy for me? I didn't want any of this either, Alex, but it's happening, and we don't have the luxury of pretending it's not. Her words stung, but Alex forced himself to stay calm. Fine, he said, his tone less accusatory. Then start at the beginning. Tell me everything. If I'm going to help you, I need to know what I'm up against. Zarelith nodded slowly. Fair enough, but you might wish you hadn't asked. She shifted in her seat, folding her hands in her lap. "You know the basics of what happened on Veltrin IV," she began. "But what you don't know is why I was there in the first place. I told you I was hiding from enemies, but it's more complicated than that." She paused, her golden eyes flickering with a mix of emotions. "I'm not just any Laverian. My family is part of the High Council, the ruling elite of our world. My father, he's one of the most powerful figures in our society." Alex's eyebrows shot up. "So you're royalty?" "Not exactly," Zarelith replied, shaking her head. "But close enough. My status made me a target. There are factions on my planet that believe the High Council is corrupt, that our traditions are holding us back. I wasn't directly involved in the conflict, but my family was." "And you ended up on Veltrin IV," Alex said, piecing it together. "To get away from it all." "To disappear," Zarelith corrected. "But the rebellion found me anyway. They wanted to use me as leverage against my father. When the insurgents attacked, I thought I was going to die. Then you showed up." Alex shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I was just doing my job." "You saved my life," Zarelith said firmly, her gaze locking onto his. "You didn't have to, but you did. And that act of kindness changed everything." Alex frowned. "How? How does saving you lead to this?" He gestured vaguely, unsure how to articulate the bizarre situation they were now in. Zarelith hesitated, her expression softening. "Our species is unique," she began. "You've probably heard that Laverians are genetically adaptable, but you don't understand the extent of it. In moments of extreme stress, like what happened on Veltrin IV, our bodies can form bonds with other beings. It's a survival mechanism, one designed to ensure our species continues no matter the circumstances." Alex stared at her, the pieces slowly falling into place. "You're saying that bond was with me?" "Yes," Zarelith said quietly. "My body recognized you as someone who could protect me, someone who could create life with me." Alex's head was spinning. "But we never." "We didn't have to," Zarelith interrupted, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "Our biology doesn't work like yours. It's not about physical contact. It's about energy, compatibility, and stress." Alex finished, his voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "This is insane." Zarelith didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the same holographic device she had shown him earlier. The projection of the hybrid fetus appeared between them, its glowing form both mesmerizing and terrifying. "This is proof, Alex," Zarelith said. "Whether you believe it or not, this child is ours. And now that my people know about it, they'll stop at nothing to ensure it never sees the light of day." Alex stared at the projection, a mix of awe and dread swirling in his chest. "Why would they care so much?" he asked. "It's just a child." "To you, maybe," Zarelith said. "But to them, it's an abomination, a symbol of everything they fear. Change, unity, breaking tradition. If the council finds us, they'll kill me. And the child." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, Alex saw the depth of her fear. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for the life of someone who didn't even exist yet. Alex took a deep breath, his mind racing. He didn't want this responsibility. He didn't ask for it. But as he looked at Zarelith, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already in too deep. "What do we do now?" he asked finally. Zarelith's expression hardened, determination replacing fear. "We survive. Together. Escaping the Supermodel's world." The hum of the stolen starship was deafening against the silence between them. Zarelith's golden eyes flicked to the navigation screen, tracking the ships pursuing them. Alex, still grappling with the revelations, sat rigidly in the co-pilot's seat. Every instinct screamed at him to demand answers, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him focused on one thing: staying alive. "They're gaining on us," Zarelith said, her calm voice betraying a flicker of tension. Alex glanced at the holographic display. Two sleek Laverian interceptors closed in on their ship, their designs unmistakably predatory. "Tell me this thing has some kind of weaponry," he said. "It doesn't," Zarelith replied, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. "It's a luxury cruiser, not a warship. The best we got is speed." Alex clenched his fists. "Great, so we're sitting ducks." "Not if I can help it," Zarelith shot back. Her focus sharpened as she activated a sequence on the console. The ship lurched violently as it accelerated, diving into a dense asteroid field. Alex gripped the armrests, his stomach flipping from the sudden maneuver. "Asteroids? Are you crazy? We'll get smashed to pieces." "Not if you trust me," Zarelith said, her tone sharp. "Do you?" Alex hesitated, the question hanging in the air. He barely knew this woman, yet here he was, running from bounty hunters and facing death. With no better options, he muttered, "I guess I don't have a choice." Zarelith smirked but didn't reply, her focus locked on the controls. She navigated the ship through the asteroid field with a precision that defied logic, weaving between massive spinning rocks and debris. The Laverian interceptors followed closely, their sharp turns equally precise. "These pilots are good," Zarelith muttered, her jaw tightening. "But I'm better." Alex couldn't help but glance at her, marveling at the confidence that radiated from her. For someone with the galaxy's deadliest assassins on her trail, she seemed almost excited. A sudden blast rocked the ship, throwing Alex against his harness. The impact sent warning lights flashing across the control panel. "They hit us," Alex shouted. "Just a glancing shot," Zarelith replied, adjusting their trajectory. Her hands moved faster now, inputting commands Alex couldn't follow. "We'll lose them soon." Alex wasn't convinced. "How? They've got faster ships, weapons, and experience hunting people like us. What's your brilliant plan?" Zarelith shot him a quick glance. "You talk too much." Before Alex could retort, the ship banked hard to the left, narrowly avoiding a collision with a jagged asteroid. Zarelith's movements became almost instinctive, as though she were part of the ship itself. Despite the chaos, Alex noticed something strange. Her focus wasn't just skill. It was almost unnatural. Her golden eyes seemed to glow faintly, and her movements were faster than what should have been possible. "What's happening to you?" Alex asked, his voice filled with a mix of awe and suspicion. Zarelith didn't answer immediately. She bit her lip, her concentration unbroken as she performed a series of daring maneuvers. Finally, she said, "Laverian biology adapts to stress, remember. I'm just doing what I need to survive." Alex swallowed hard, unsure whether to be impressed or terrified. "Remind me never to underestimate you." The ship suddenly shot forward, narrowly escaping another barrage of laser fire. Zarelith let out a sharp breath, her confidence returning. "Almost there." "Almost where?" Alex asked. "Just trust me," she replied, her fingers inputting a final sequence into the console. A small icon blinked on the navigation screen, a nearby wormhole. "You're taking us through that?" Alex asked, his voice rising. "You don't even know where it leads." "I know it leads away from them," Zarelith countered, her voice firm. "And that's all that matters." The wormhole loomed ahead, a swirling vortex of energy that pulsed with an ominous glow. Behind them, the interceptors fired another volley of shots. One laser grazed the ship's rear engines, sending another jolt through the cabin. Warning alarms blared as systems began to fail. "Hold on," Zarelith shouted, pushing the throttle to maximum. The ship surged forward, plunging into the wormhole just as the interceptors closed the gap. The vortex swallowed them whole, its energy distorting everything in an explosion of light and sound. Moments later, when the chaos subsided, Alex opened his eyes to find the ship floating in an eerie, empty expanse. The wormhole had spit them out in a region of space unlike anything he'd seen before. The stars here were dim and scattered, and a faint green mist clung to the edges of the viewport. Zarelith exhaled deeply, leaning back in her seat. We made it. Alex wasn't so sure. Where are we? Uncharted space, Zarelith replied, checking the navigation console. Far enough that the Livarian Council won't find us immediately. Alex let out a bitter laugh. Great, so now we're just lost fugitives in the middle of nowhere. Zarelith turned to him, her golden eyes softening. We're alive, Alex. That's more than I expected an hour ago. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Fine. What's next? Zarelith hesitated before answering. We need to refuel and make repairs. There's an old outpost nearby. It's abandoned, but it should have what we need. And what if it doesn't? Alex asked. Zarelith smirked. Then we improvise. It's what humans are good at, isn't it? Despite himself, Alex chuckled. Fair point. As the ship limped toward the distant outpost, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Zarelith's world was one of secrets, danger, and impossible truths. And now, he was part of it. But one thing was certain, there was no turning back now. The chase across the stars. The ship limped toward the outpost Zarelith had mentioned, its damaged engines sputtering intermittently. Alex stared out the viewport, the stars blurring slightly as the ship glided through the eerie green mist of uncharted space. Every instinct in him screamed to turn back, to abandon this wild chase, and return to the relative safety of Earth. But the holographic image of the hybrid child still lingered in his mind, and Zarelith's quiet determination kept him rooted in his seat. You're awfully calm for someone being hunted by their own people, Alex said, breaking the silence. Zarelith smirked but kept her focus on the navigation console. Calm is a luxury I've learned to fake. Inside, I'm just as terrified as you are, if not more. Terrified? Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. You didn't look terrified back there, pulling off those insane maneuvers. You looked like you were having fun. Zarelith shot him a sideways glance, her golden eyes glinting. I guess I'm full of surprises. Before Alex could respond, a sudden beeping sound filled the cabin. Zarelith's smirk vanished as her fingers flew across the controls. A holographic display appeared, showing a series of red blips closing in on their position. Tell me that's just Tabriz, Alex said, his stomach sinking. Tabriz doesn't chase you, Zarelith muttered. Her expression hardened. They found us. How? We went through a wormhole, Alex exclaimed, leaning forward to get a better look at the display. They must have anticipated it, Zarelith replied, her voice tense. The Council has resources beyond what you can imagine. They're relentless when it comes to enforcing their laws, especially when someone like me breaks them. Alex frowned. What do you mean, someone like you? Zarelith hesitated, as if weighing how much to reveal. I told you my family is part of the High Council, she said finally. What I didn't tell you is that I was supposed to be their perfect little role model. The face of Livarian tradition and purity. Let me guess, Alex said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Running off to become a supermodel and having a hybrid child wasn't part of the plan. Zarelith laughed bitterly. You could say that. The ship shuddered as a distant explosion lit up the viewport. The pursuing ships had begun firing. Zarelith gritted her teeth and pushed the throttle forward, but the damaged engines groaned in protest. They're faster than us, she said, her voice calm but grim. If we don't think of something, they'll catch us within minutes. Do you have weapons on this outpost we're heading to? Alex asked. It's an abandoned mining station, Zarelith replied. Anything useful was probably stripped away decades ago. Alex cursed under his breath. Then we need a distraction. Zarelith tilted her head, intrigued. What kind of distraction? I've got an idea, Alex said, unbuckling his harness. He stood and moved toward the rear of the ship, ignoring Zarelith's questioning gaze. Just keep them off us long enough for me to set it up. Zarelith hesitated but nodded. Fine. But if you get us killed, I'll haunt you." Alex chuckled despite the tension. Noted. The improvised plan. In the rear compartment, Alex rummaged through the limited supplies on board. The Liverian luxury cruiser wasn't equipped for combat, but it did have a few tools and devices meant for emergencies. He grabbed a beacon, a canister of high-energy fuel, and a handful of spare parts. "Let's hope this works," he muttered to himself, his hands working quickly. Years of training as a diplomat hadn't prepared him for situations like this, but he'd always prided himself on being resourceful. He attached the beacon to the fuel canister and rigged it to explode on a timer. Back in the cockpit, Zareleth's voice crackled over the intercom. "They're closing in. Whatever you're doing, do it faster." "Almost ready," Alex replied. He activated the timer and set the device in the ship's airlock. As the countdown ticked away, he returned to the cockpit. "What did you do?" Zareleth asked, her eyes darting between the controls and him. "Let's just say we're giving them a present," Alex said. "Open the airlock when I tell you." Zareleth hesitated, then nodded. "All right. On your signal." The red blips on the holographic display were now dangerously close. Zareleth pulled the ship into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding another volley of laser fire. The pursuing ships followed, their weapons lighting up the void. "Now," Alex shouted. Zareleth hit a button, and the airlock opened, jettisoning the makeshift explosive into space. The beacon activated, emitting a signal that mimicked the cruiser's energy signature. Almost immediately, the pursuing ships diverted their attention to the decoy. The fuel canister detonated moments later, sending a brilliant explosion rippling through the void. One of the pursuing ships was caught in the blast, its hull crumpling under the shockwave. The others veered off course, temporarily disoriented. "That bought us some time," Alex said, sinking back into his seat. Zareleth glanced at him, a mixture of relief and admiration in her expression. "Not bad, human. I might keep you around." "Glad to know I'm useful," Alex replied, his voice laced with exhaustion. Reaching the outpost, the cruiser finally limped into the shadow of the mining outpost. The structure was ancient, its metallic surface pockmarked with age and neglect. Zareleth guided the ship into a docking bay, her movements precise despite the stress of the chase. As the engines powered down, Alex let out a long breath. "We're safe, for now." Zareleth stood, her expression serious. "Don't get too comfortable. The Council won't give up that easily." "I figured," Alex said, following her toward the airlock. "But at least we got a moment to breathe." As they stepped onto the outpost's dimly lit platform, Zareleth turned to him. "Thank you, Alex, for everything." Alex met her gaze, his resolve hardening. "We're not done yet. Let's figure out how to survive the next part." Zareleth nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Together, they disappeared into the shadows of the outpost, ready to face whatever came next. Alex stared at her, the pieces slowly falling into place. "You're saying that Bond was with me?" "Yes," Zareleth said quietly. "My body recognized you as someone who could protect me, someone who could create life with me." Alex's head was spinning. "But we didn't have to," Zareleth interrupted, her voice steady but tinged with sadness. "Our biology doesn't work like yours. It's not about physical contact. It's about energy, compatibility, and stress." Alex finished, his voice barely above a whisper. He leaned back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "This is insane." Zareleth didn't argue. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out the same holographic device she had shown him earlier. The projection of the hybrid fetus appeared between them, its glowing form both mesmerizing and terrifying. "This is proof, Alex," Zareleth said. "Whether you believe it or not, this child is ours. And now that my people know about it, they'll stop at nothing to ensure it never sees the light of day." Alex stared at the projection, a mix of awe and dread swirling in his chest. "Why would they care so much?" he asked. "It's just a child." "To you, maybe," Zarelith said. "But to them, it's an abomination, a symbol of everything they fear: change, unity, breaking tradition. If the council finds us, they'll kill me. And the child." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time, Alex saw the depth of her fear. She wasn't just running for herself. She was running for the life of someone who didn't even exist yet. Alex took a deep breath, his mind racing. He didn't want this responsibility. He didn't ask for it. But as he looked at Zarelith, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was already in too deep. "What do we do now?" he asked finally. Zarelith's expression hardened, determination replacing fear. "We survive. Together." Escaping the supermodel's world. The hum of the stolen starship was deafening against the silence between them. Zarelith's golden eyes flicked to the navigation screen, tracking the ships pursuing them. Alex, still grappling with the revelations, sat rigidly in the co-pilot's seat. Every instinct screamed at him to demand answers, but the adrenaline coursing through his veins kept him focused on one thing: staying alive. "They're gaining on us," Zarelith said, her calm voice betraying a flicker of tension. Alex glanced at the holographic display. Two sleek Laverian interceptors closed in on their ship, their designs unmistakably predatory. "Tell me this thing has some kind of weaponry," he said. "It doesn't," Zarelith replied, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. "It's a luxury cruiser, not a warship. The best we've got is speed." Alex clenched his fists. "Great, so we're sitting ducks." "Not if I can help it," Zarelith shot back. Her focus sharpened as she activated a sequence on the console. The ship lurched violently as it accelerated, diving into a dense asteroid field. Alex gripped the armrests, his stomach flipping from the sudden maneuver. "Asteroids? Are you crazy? We'll get smashed to pieces." "Not if you trust me," Zarelith said, her tone sharp. "Do you?" Alex hesitated, the question hanging in the air. He barely knew this woman, yet here he was, running from bounty hunters and facing death. With no better options, he muttered, "I guess I don't have a choice." Zarelith smirked but didn't reply, her focus locked on the controls. She navigated the ship through the asteroid field with a precision that defied logic, weaving between massive spinning rocks and debris. The Laverian interceptors followed closely, their sharp turns equally precise. "These pilots are good," Zarelith muttered, her jaw tightening. "But I'm better." Alex couldn't help but glance at her, marveling at the confidence that radiated from her. For someone with the galaxy's deadliest assassins on her trail, she seemed almost excited. A sudden blast rocked the ship, throwing Alex against his harness. The impact sent warning lights flashing across the control panel. "They hit us," Alex shouted. "Just a glancing shot," Zarelith replied, adjusting their trajectory. Her hands moved faster now, inputting commands Alex couldn't follow. "We'll lose them soon." Alex wasn't convinced. How? They'd got faster ships, weapons, and experience hunting people like us. "What's your brilliant plan?" Zarelith shot him a quick glance. "You talk too much." Confronting the council. The ancient halls of the Laverian High Council shimmered with an ethereal glow, their walls forged from a crystal-like material that refracted light into a kaleidoscope of colors. The air was heavy with the hum of energy, a reminder of the council's immense power. Zarelith had once walked these halls with pride, her presence a symbol of her family's status. Now, as she stood at their threshold, her heart pounding as if it might burst from her chest. Beside her, Alex adjusted the collar of his jacket, trying to mask his unease. The two had managed to infiltrate Laveria, the capital planet, using forged documents and a stolen clearance code. The journey here had been harrowing, filled with near captures and desperate escapes. Now, they were about to face the council, the most dangerous part of their plan. "Are you sure about this?" Alex asked, his voice low. His gaze shifted nervously to the towering double doors that led to the council chamber. Walking into the heart of their power doesn't seem like the smartest move. It's the only move we have, Zarelith replied, her voice steady but her hands trembling. If we don't confront them directly, they'll never stop hunting us. Alex frowned, but he didn't argue. He had learned over the past few days that Zarelith was not a woman to be swayed once she set her mind to something. He just hoped her confidence wasn't misplaced. The doors opened with a low rumble, revealing a vast circular chamber filled with Liverian dignitaries. The council members sat in elevated seats, their imposing figures draped in robes that shimmered like starlight. Their faces were stern, their golden eyes piercing as they regarded the unexpected intruders. Zarelith stepped forward, her chin held high. "I request an audience with the High Council," she announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. A murmur rippled through the assembly. One of the council members, an elder with a striking silver crest atop his head, leaned forward. His gaze locked onto Zarelith, and for a moment, his expression softened. "Zarelith," he said, his voice both stern and weary, "you returned to us after years of disgrace, bringing a human into our sacred halls. Explain yourself." "I'm here to protect my child," Zarelith replied, her tone unwavering, "and to expose the hypocrisy of this council." The murmurs grew louder, some voices laced with outrage. Alex shifted uncomfortably, feeling the weight of countless hostile eyes on him. Zarelith, however, remained unshaken. "You speak of hypocrisy." Another council member sneered, her golden eyes narrowing. "You abandoned your duties, tarnished your family's honor, and now you stand before us with a hybrid abomination." Zarelith's fists clenched, but she kept her composure. "Yes, I stand before you with a hybrid child, a child that represents hope, not shame. For centuries, this council has clung to outdated traditions, isolating our people and stifling progress. But the galaxy is changing, whether you like it or not." The elder counselor who had spoken first raised a hand, silencing the murmurs. "You believe this child is a symbol of hope?" he asked, his tone measured. "Do you truly think our people will accept such a deviation?" "Yes," Zarelith said firmly, "because I will make them understand. And if they refuse, then perhaps it's time for a new era, one that doesn't rely on fear and suppression." Alex watched in awe as Zarelith stood her ground, her words cutting through the room like a blade. He had seen her confidence before, but this was different. She wasn't just fighting for herself or even their child. She was challenging an entire system. The elder counselor leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. "Your words are bold, Zarelith, but words alone will not sway this council." "They don't have to," Zarelith replied, her gaze sweeping across the assembly. "Actions will." An explosive turn. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open, and a group of heavily armed guards stormed in. Their armor glinted under the chamber's light, and their weapons were trained on Zarelith and Alex. "Arrest them," one of the guards barked, "by order of the council." Alex instinctively stepped in front of Zarelith, his hands raised in a futile attempt to shield her. "This isn't a debate anymore," he muttered under his breath. "They're not interested in listening." Zarelith's eyes narrowed. "Then we make them listen." In a swift motion, she activated a small device concealed in her sleeve. The room was instantly bathed in a blinding light, causing the guards to falter. Alex felt a tug on his arm as Zarelith pulled him toward a side exit. "This way," she shouted. The two sprinted down a narrow corridor, the sound of shouting guards echoing behind them. Zarelith led them through a maze of passages, her knowledge of the palace's layout proving invaluable. Alex struggled to keep up, his heart pounding as adrenaline coursed through his veins. "Do you have a plan, or are we just running blindly?" he asked, his voice breathless. "We're not running," Zarelith replied, her tone resolute. "We're regrouping." The message of defiance. They emerged into a small control room, its walls lined with monitors and communication panels. Zarelith immediately began inputting commands, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "What are you doing?" Alex asked, glancing nervously at the door. "Sending a message," Zarelith said. "If the Council won't listen to me directly, then I'll make sure the entire galaxy hears what I have to say." The monitors flickered to life, displaying Zarelith's image across countless channels. Her voice rang out with clarity and conviction as she addressed not just the Council, but the people of Liveria and beyond. "My name is Zarelith," she began. "I stand before you as a mother, a daughter, and a citizen of this galaxy. For too long, we have allowed fear and prejudice to dictate our lives. But today, I say enough." Her words were powerful, and Alex could see their impact even in the brief moments they played. The message was reaching people. Zarelith wasn't just fighting for survival, she was igniting a revolution. As the sounds of approaching guards grew louder, Zarelith finished her broadcast. "We are stronger together than apart. It's time to embrace the future, not fear it." She cut the transmission and turned to Alex, her expression fierce. "Now we fight. A new future." The stolen transmission from Zarelith's broadcast rippled across the galaxy, igniting debates in council chambers, marketplaces, and private homes. Her words, defiant, passionate, and unyielding, challenged centuries of Liverian tradition. But within the halls of power, chaos reigned. Escape under fire. The control room's walls trembled as explosions rocked the palace. Guards swarmed the corridors, their shouts echoing closer. Zarelith and Alex stood back to back, their breaths labored from the constant pursuit. "They're not stopping," Alex muttered, sweat dripping down his forehead. "They won't," Zarelith replied, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Not until they've silenced us, or until we've shown them we can't be silenced." The pair darted into a narrow service tunnel, the dim lighting casting long shadows on the metallic walls. Alex clutched a small energy pistol he'd scavenged earlier, its weight unfamiliar in his hands. Zarelith led the way, her movements swift and deliberate. "We need to reach the outer landing bay," Zarelith said. "There's a transport there we can use." "And what happens when we get off this planet?" Alex asked. "The Council won't just let us disappear. They'll keep hunting us." Zarelith paused briefly, turning to face him. Her golden eyes glimmered with a mix of determination and something softer, hope. "Then we keep fighting. Not just for ourselves, but for the galaxy we want our child to live in." Alex nodded, the weight of her words settling in his chest. He hadn't signed up for this, but he was in it now, and there was no turning back. Confronting the extremists, as they neared the landing bay, the sounds of conflict grew louder. The Council's guards weren't the only ones involved. Zarelith's broadcast had reached sympathetic ears, and dissenters within the Liverian ranks had begun to rise. Small skirmishes erupted across the palace grounds as factions clashed over the future Zarelith had envisioned. When Alex and Zarelith stepped onto the landing platform, they were met with a sight that stole their breath. A large transport ship sat in the center, its engines humming, but it was surrounded by armed extremists loyal to the old ways. "There's no way we're getting past them," Alex whispered. "We don't have to," Zarelith replied. She stepped forward, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "Let me speak to them." "Are you serious?" Alex hissed. "They're here to kill us." Zarelith ignored him, her voice ringing out across the platform. "You all know who I am," she began, her tone commanding. "You've been told I'm a traitor, an abomination. But do you know why?" The extremists hesitated, their weapons still raised but their resolve faltering. Zarelith took another step forward, her golden eyes locking onto theirs. "I'm fighting for a future where our children don't have to live in fear of being different. A future where Liveria isn't defined by isolation and prejudice, but by unity and strength. You can kill me, but you can't kill the truth." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one of the extremists lowered his weapon. Others followed, Their expressions conflicted. Zaraleth's words had struck a chord, even among those who had come to destroy her. Taking advantage of the moment, Alex gestured for Zaraleth to move toward the ship. The extremists didn't stop them. Instead, they watched in silence as the pair boarded the transport and prepared for takeoff. A final confrontation. As the transport lifted off, Zaraleth and Alex breathed a sigh of relief. But their victory was short-lived. A Liverian battle cruiser loomed on the horizon, its weapons locked onto their ship. "They're not letting us go," Alex said, gripping the controls. "We don't need to fight them," Zaraleth replied, her fingers dancing over the ship's communication panel. "We need to finish what we started." She activated the ship's broadcast system, patching directly into the battle cruiser's communication line. Her face appeared on their screens, her voice calm but resolute. "People of Liveria," she began, "you've been told that I am a danger to our society. But ask yourselves, what are we truly afraid of? Change, progress, a future where our children can choose their own paths." Her words resonated, even with those aboard the cruiser. Alex watched the scanner nervously as the ship's weapons powered down, one by one. "They're standing down," Alex said, disbelief in his voice. "For now," Zaraleth replied, "but this is just the beginning." The birth of a movement. Days later, Zaraleth and Alex found themselves on a remote planet, surrounded by supporters who had rallied to their cause. Liverians, humans, and beings from countless other species joined them, inspired by Zaraleth's vision for a unified galaxy. In the quiet moments, Alex found himself drawn to Zaraleth's strength and vulnerability. They had come so far together, and yet the road ahead seemed even longer. One evening, as they stood beneath a sky filled with unfamiliar stars, Zaraleth placed a hand on her abdomen, a faint smile on her lips. "This child," she said softly, "is proof that our differences can make us stronger." Alex nodded, his voice steady. "And we'll make sure they grow up in a galaxy worth fighting for." A new era. Zaraleth's defiance had sparked a revolution. Across Liveria and beyond, people began to question the old ways and embrace the possibility of something new. The High Council, though shaken, could no longer ignore the growing tide of change. As Zaraleth and Alex prepared for the battles ahead, they knew their fight wasn't just about survival. It was about building a future where love, hope, and unity could triumph over fear. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, their story became a beacon, a tale of courage, defiance, and the unbreakable bond between two souls who dared to change the stars.